Story number 1. I moved to a new town around 2 weeks ago. It's around 4 hours away from where I lived previously. I only know 2 people who live in this town. The 2 people are a couple who live next door to me and my mum. On Friday, I receive a message saying, "Hi." I didn't reply to it. It was from a number I didn't recognise, and I'm really not good with texting people back, so like I said, I didn't reply. On Sunday, I received another message. I didn't actually check my phone until Monday. Like I said, I'm awful with it, and most of the time it lives at the bottom of my bag. This one said, "I see you," and they had taken a picture of me walking down the street carrying shopping with my mum. They then sent another message saying, "I also saw you here too." This was a picture of me in a pub with the couple I knew. After that, I was obviously creeped out, so I sent them a message saying, "Who is this? It can't be the couple as they're sat right next to me in the picture, and the photo was taken from afar." Around 10 minutes later, I got another message of this person. They'd taken another picture of me, but this time it was whilst I was out eating food with the girl of the couple I knew, and it said, "Did you enjoy your burger?" This time I said, "Who the fuck is this? This is really creepy. Tell me who you are." They read my message but haven't replied to it. I phone the number and all I hear when I answer the phone is a man, I think, heavily breathing. I literally don't know what to do. Should I be scared? I have no idea how they got my number. What do I do? Go to the police and show them the creepy pictures? Story number 2. My parents' house is modest but nice for the area it's in the north of England. When they chose the place back in the late 80s, they did so because it faces out onto a huge field, and in that area, greenery is in short supply. At the edge of the field, directly opposite the front door and window, is a dense line of tall trees. During the day, they make for a beautiful view. At night, they realised fairly quickly that the darkness just beyond those trees can be quite creepy. Not long after they moved in, they were burgled and were told by the police that in all likelihood, the burglars had been watching the house from that tree line for days to learn their routine and wait for an opening due to a clear knowledge of the house's layout. After that, my father installed a house alarm. In the early 2000s, he installed CCTV and a floodlight activated by motion sensors after a series of robberies in the area and some trouble with a group of local kids. The camera on the front captures their small garden, the dozen or so steps leading to the street, and a decent amount of the street beyond it. The floodlight normally activates if anyone gets anywhere past halfway down the steps. I went back to stay with my parents in autumn 2015 while I waited for my new apartment to be ready. They hadn't had any trouble from those kids for a long time, and there had been no reports of robberies in the area for about as long. Generally, it's the kind of place I walk at night without giving it a second's thought. Around 11 PM on my first night there, my father was out at work and I was watching TV in the front room with my mother. Out of nowhere, there was a loud bang on the front window. I got up and went outside to investigate and was annoyed to find that the floodlight wasn't working. Lying in front of the window was a huge pile of dirt and rocks that somebody had obviously thrown from the front street. I looked up and down the street but couldn't see anything. I looked out towards the line of darkened trees and again, nothing. But have you ever had one of those weird feelings, like there are eyes on you that you can't see? I couldn't shake it. After going back inside, I asked my mother if I should go check the CCTV recording, and she explained that it had stopped working years beforehand, but they'd left the very obvious camera housings in place as a deterrent. Smart, I thought, but not so useful in this kind of situation, and obviously not doing much as a deterrent either. She also explained that they'd switched off the floodlight because a bunch of local cats used to think it was hilarious to set it off all through the night. And although you couldn't tell from the living room due to all the indoor lights, it wasn't so fun from the upstairs rooms when it went off every 10 minutes and you were trying to get to sleep. The next day, my father decided it was time he replaced the camera just in case anything like that happened again. He opted for one with infrared so that you'd still get a decent view of the garden and street at night. He installed it, hooked it up to a DVR, and set it running from that night onwards. The thing was tiny, barely noticeable from the street, and on the other side of the house to the huge, obvious older camera housing. Again, around 11 PM on night 2, there was another loud thud against the front window. This time, me and my father went out to investigate. Again, nothing there except a pile of broken apart rocks and dirt, which had been balled up and thrown. We went back inside, rewound the DVR by 5 minutes or so, and watched. Into view strolled a guy in a hoodie, with the hood pulled up to obscure his face. He walked parallel to the house until he was directly opposite the window, and stopped. He turned to face the window, and just stood there, staring at the closed blinds for a good 30 seconds. He then reached into his pocket, pulled out what we assume was the clump of dirt, threw it, and sprinted for the tree line opposite. We couldn't see how far in he went, but he slowed down just before dropping out of sight, so we assumed he was still there when we came outside, watching. As I said, my parents dealt with this kind of crap from local kids for a long time, and they naturally assumed that's what they were dealing with again. One of the kids, no longer a kid but an adult who hadn't done much growing up, still occasionally yelled things at them from across the street, so he was a prime suspect. They agreed to switch the floodlight back on as an extra deterrent. The next day, my father dropped into the local police station and asked their advice on what had happened. Since there was no real damage done, after a quick scrub the windows were as good as new, and the footage didn't capture a face, they said there was nothing they could do, but advised him to monitor the situation and come back if things escalated. That night, 11 PM came and went, and nothing. I remember my mother making a comment to the effect of being glad that whoever it was had obviously gotten bored and found something more interesting to do. Satisfied that nothing was going to happen, I had a quick cigarette at the front door, scanning the tree line as best I could through the darkness, just in case, and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up and looked out the bedroom window to the front garden. The gate leading to the steps was wide open, and I couldn't remember if it had been the night before. My mother was obsessed with it being kept closed, and always complained about the postman leaving it open, so I assumed he must have done it. When I got downstairs, there was no post waiting on the doormat. Not exactly damning evidence of anything, but it prompted me to check the DVR. I rewound it a couple of hours, and the whole time, the gate was open. But no postman, or anyone else for that matter. I kept going, 4 AM, 2 AM, midnight, open the whole time. As I rewound it all the way to 11 PM the night before, I saw a flurry of rapid movement on the recording. I played it from 11 PM. The gate was closed. Around 11:15 PM, a pair of headlights came around the corner at the end of the street, and a large white van slowly pulled into view. It slowed more and more until it got level with the house and stopped. Out of it climbed the guy in the hoodie, again with the hood pulled over his face. He reached across to the passenger seat and pulled out a heavy-looking bag, going off how it dropped as he slid it out of the van, gently closed the van door, and walked straight for the front gate. He lifted the gate slowly from its catch and swung it open, making sure it didn't hit anything. Then he took a few steps towards the door, cautiously. He stopped, looked around to make sure nobody was coming, and took a few more steps. Again he stopped, checked, and was obviously satisfied that he wasn't going to be confronted. Unfortunately for him, he took one more step and reached the halfway point on the stairs. On went the floodlight, lighting up the garden and our unwelcomed guest. He froze again, clearly unsure what to do. Then he looked down at the bag in his hand and turned his face up to look directly into the camera lens. The angle of both the floodlight and the camera meant I got a good look at the bottom half of his face, and the big grin plastered all over it. And just like that, he turned around, strolled back up the steps and got into his van. With him gone, the floodlight switched itself off again. Except he didn't leave. I watched the headlights get smaller as he reversed back the way he came and stopped at the end of the street just within view. Then he turned off the engine and waited. At this point, I'd totally forgotten the sequence of events from the previous night and felt a shot of ice go down my back when I saw a slither of light appear as I opened the door and stepped just outside of it for a cigarette. I stood there, obviously scanning the trees in front of me, while 50 yards to my left, this guy sat watching. I disappeared back inside. A few minutes passed and the headlights flashed back to life, growing closer again. The van appeared behind them, crawling back towards the house. It got right outside again, stopped for just a second, and then pulled away, out of shot. Understandably freaked out, I told my parents and asked my father to go back to the police and tell them that we now had a trespasser. He did. Their response? That it was probably just someone looking for directions, and in any event, without any way of getting an ID. At no point were the van's license plates clearly visible enough to read because of the headlights. It would be a waste of their time. They didn't even want to see the footage. Nice. We monitored the CCTV for the weeks I was there afterwards, but our nighttime visitor never came back. No idea what he wanted, why he was watching the house, testing our reactions, came calling when he knew we were all home, or why he specifically targeted us in a row of terraced properties. But after getting a look at that smile, I'm glad I didn't decide to go smoke a few minutes earlier that night. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed.